Michael Jordan stepped out of his black luxury car, the engine humming softly as he pulled up to the grand entrance of the Regal Crest Hotel. The towering structure gleamed under the city lights, its golden windows reflecting the bustling nightlife of downtown Chicago. Dressed in a simple yet elegant tracksuit and a pair of his signature Air Jordans, he exuded a quiet confidence that had become his trademark. The doorman, an elderly gentleman with a knowing smile, immediately recognized him and gave a respectful nod, holding the door open as Jordan strode inside. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The hotel lobby was nothing short of breathtaking. A vast expanse of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and plush velvet seating. A soft murmur of conversations filled the air, blending seamlessly with the faint sound of jazz playing in the background. Despite the opulence, Jordan had never been one to bask in luxury for its own sake. To him, this was business, another feather in his cap of investments. Unbeknownst to most people, Michael Jordan was the majority owner of the Regal Crest Hotel. He had quietly acquired the property years ago, seeing its potential to become a world-class establishment. He rarely flaunted his ownership, preferring to let his managers run things smoothly. But tonight, he wanted to see for himself how the hotel was operating. No security detail, no prior announcement. Just him walking in as any other guest would. He had always believed that the best way to assess a business was to experience it as a customer. As he approached the reception desk, he noticed a young woman standing behind the polished marble counter. Her name tag read Jessica. She had a sharp professional demeanor, her auburn hair neatly pulled back into a bun, her uniform crisp and pristine. She glanced up as he stepped forward, her expression immediately shifting to one of scrutiny. "Good evening," Jordan said, his deep voice carrying the effortless authority that had commanded locker rooms and boardrooms alike. "I'd like to book a suite for the night." Jessica barely spared him a second glance. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked in a clipped tone. "No," Jordan replied, resting his forearms on the counter. "I was hoping to check in now." She sighed, exasperated, and tapped on her keyboard with exaggerated slowness. "We only have premium suites available," she said, looking up at him with a skeptical expression. "They start at $3,000 per night." Jordan gave a small, amused smile. "That's fine." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly as she took a more scrutinizing look at him. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit, nor was he adorned with flashy jewelry. To her, he was just another well-built man in sneakers and a tracksuit. Probably someone trying to impress a woman by pretending to afford a suite in a five-star hotel. "You'll need to provide a credit card," she said, her tone bordering on condescending. "And I'm going to have to run it first." Jordan chuckled softly. He had encountered situations like this before, moments where people underestimated him because he didn't fit the stereotype of a wealthy businessman. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card, setting it gently on the counter. Jessica took it with an arched brow and ran it through the system. Within seconds, the transaction was approved without hesitation. For a moment, a flicker of doubt crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Well, you're lucky," she said, handing him back his card. "I suppose we can accommodate you." Jordan simply nodded, his amusement growing. "Appreciate it." She printed out the paperwork, sliding it across the counter with a pen. "Sign here," she instructed, barely looking at him. As he signed, a well-dressed older gentleman emerged from a nearby office. Mr. Whitaker, the general manager of the hotel. His sharp eyes swept across the lobby, landing on Jordan. The moment recognition dawned, his face went pale. He hurried over with a nervous energy, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. "Mr. Jordan!" Whitaker exclaimed, his voice laced with both surprise and panic. "What a pleasure to see you here, sir!" Jessica's head snapped up so fast that her bun nearly came undone. Her face drained of color as she looked between Jordan and Whitaker, realization crashing over her like a tidal wave. Jordan, still composed, simply leaned back against the counter. "Mr. Whitaker," he greeted smoothly. "I was just checking in." Whitaker's gaze darted to Jessica, who suddenly looked as though she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Sir, had I known that I own this hotel?" Jordan finished for him, his voice calm but firm. Jessica's mouth fell open, her previously smug demeanor now completely shattered. You're the owner?" she stammered, her hands trembling slightly. Jordan held her gaze. his expression unreadable. "That's right," he said evenly. "And I wanted to see firsthand how guests are treated here." Whitaker looked as though he might faint. "I deeply apologize, Mr. Jordan," he said, shooting a sharp glance at Jessica. "This is not how we conduct business." Jessica, now visibly panicked, fumbled for words. I didn't realize that I could afford it," Jordan asked, his voice carrying a quiet authority that left no room for excuses. No, I just assumed," she stuttered. "That's the problem," he said, shaking his head. "You assumed." A heavy silence filled the lobby. Other guests had begun to notice the tension, their hushed conversations and sideways glances confirming that this moment would not be forgotten any time soon. Whitaker cleared his throat, desperate to mend the situation. "Mr. Jordan, please allow me to personally escort you to our finest penthouse suite. Complimentary, of course." Jordan waved a hand. "That won't be necessary. I came to experience the service like any other guest." Jessica, still pale, swallowed hard. "Mr. Jordan, He held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Respect goes a long way," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Treat every guest like they matter, not just the ones you think can afford it." She nodded vigorously, looking down at the counter in shame. "Understood, sir." Jordan picked up his room key, slipping it into his pocket. "I hope you do." With that, he turned and made his way to the elevators, leaving behind a stunned lobby and a receptionist who had just learned the most unforgettable lesson of her career. As Michael Jordan walked toward the elevators, the atmosphere in the hotel lobby remained thick with tension. The soft murmur of conversations that had previously filled the space had died down as guests and employees alike processed what had just transpired. The reception desk, once bustling with a steady stream of check-ins and inquiries, was now eerily quiet. Jessica, the receptionist, stood frozen in place, her hands clenched into fists as she fought back the rising heat of embarrassment flooding her cheeks. Whitaker, the hotel's general manager, let out a slow breath, glancing at her with something between disappointment and sympathy. "Jessica," he said in a low voice, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" She opened her mouth but quickly shut it, her throat dry. She had worked at the Regal Crest for almost 2 years, priding herself on her professionalism, her ability to handle high-profile guests, and her keen eye for spotting those who didn't belong. And yet, here she was, having just humiliated one of the most legendary figures in sports and business. Worse, she had disrespected the man who owned the very establishment that paid her salary. Whitaker shook his head. "Come with me." His voice carried no anger, just the weary tone of a man who knew damage control was needed. Jessica followed him into his office, her legs shaky beneath her. As the door clicked shut behind them, she sank into the chair opposite Whitaker's desk, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the words coming out of his mouth. "Do you understand why this is a problem?" Whitaker asked, rubbing his temples. She nodded slowly, her lips pressed together in a tight line. "I made an assumption," she admitted, "and I was wrong." "Not just wrong," Whitaker corrected. "You were rude, dismissive. You treated Mr. Jordan like someone who wasn't worth your time. In the hospitality industry, that's unacceptable. It doesn't matter if the person standing in front of you is a billionaire or someone just scraping by. You treat them with the same level of respect." Jessica exhaled shakily, nodding again. "I let my own biases get in the way." Whitaker leaned back in his chair, studying her. "This isn't just about keeping your job, Jessica," he said. "It's about how you carry yourself in life. Mr. Jordan didn't come here expecting special treatment. He wanted to see if this hotel runs the way it should, and if your behavior is any indication, we have some serious issues to address." Jessica swallowed hard. "What do I do now?" Whitaker sighed, drumming his fingers against his desk. "First, you're going to apologize to him, properly. No excuses, no justifications. Then you're going to take this as a learning experience and make sure it never happens again." She nodded, though the thought of facing Michael Jordan again made her stomach twist into knots. "Understood." Whitaker glanced at his watch. "Good. He'll be staying in the penthouse suite. I suggest you find an appropriate time to deliver that apology." Jessica rose from her seat, her nerves rattling. "I will." But as she left the office, doubt clawed at her. Would an apology even make a difference to a man like Michael Jordan? Or had she just cost herself everything? Meanwhile, Michael Jordan stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. He leaned against the polished wood paneling, watching the numbers ascend. He wasn't angry. He had dealt with far worse in his lifetime, but he was disappointed. The Regal Crest was supposed to be a place of excellence, a reflection of the values he upheld. If the employees couldn't even extend basic respect to their guests, what else was going wrong behind the scenes? The elevator doors slid open, revealing the private corridor that led to the penthouse suite. The space was designed with luxury in mind. Soft, ambient lighting, handcrafted artwork lining the walls, and a grand double-door entrance that led to the suite itself. He stepped inside, taking in the elegant furnishings, the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline, and the state-of-the-art amenities. It was everything he had envisioned when he had first invested in the hotel. But none of that mattered if the service wasn't up to par. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number of the hotel's regional director, Mr. Langston. If there were deeper issues within the Regal Crest, he wanted answers, and he wanted them now. The call was answered on the second ring. "Mr. Jordan, what a pleasure to hear from you." "Langston," Jordan said, his voice even. "We need to talk about the way this hotel is being run." Downstairs, Jessica paced behind the reception desk, clutching a notepad in her hands. She had rehearsed what she was going to say at least a dozen times in her head, but the words still felt insufficient. How did you apologize to a man like Michael Jordan? How did you make up for a first impression so disastrous? Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself and walked toward the elevator. Each second of the ride up felt agonizingly slow. When the doors finally opened, she hesitated before stepping out into the dimly lit corridor. The penthouse suite loomed ahead, its doors closed, the space eerily silent. Jessica raised a shaky hand and knocked. The door swung open a few moments later, and there he was, Michael Jordan, standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she forgot how to speak. "Mr. Jordan," she managed finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you earlier." He said nothing, watching her with the same intensity that had unsettled so many opponents on the basketball court. Jessica swallowed. "I was wrong to judge you, to assume anything about you. It was unprofessional, and it was unacceptable. I let my own biases affect the way I did my job, and for that I sincerely apologize." Still, Jordan remained silent. The weight of his gaze made her shift uncomfortably. "I know words don't mean much without actions," she continued. "But I want you to know that I've learned from this, and I'll do better." There was another pause, then, to her surprise, Jordan nodded. "Good," he said simply. Jessica blinked. "Good?" Jordan leaned against the doorway, crossing his arms. "It takes a lot to own up to your mistakes. Most people don't. I respect that." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you. But," he added, his voice firm, "an apology doesn't fix the problem. The problem isn't just how you treated me, it's how you might treat someone else who doesn't look like they belong. That needs to change." Jessica nodded quickly. "It will." Jordan studied her for another moment before stepping back. "All right then," she hesitated. "Would you like me to arrange anything for you during your stay? A meal? A tour of the amenities?" Jordan chuckled, shaking his head. "I think I'll manage, but I appreciate the offer." Jessica gave him a small, genuine smile before turning to leave. As she walked back to the elevator, she felt lighter. Not because her mistake had been erased, but because she had been given a chance to be better. The following morning, word of the incident had spread throughout the hotel. Employees whispered about how the owner himself had checked in undercover, how the receptionist had nearly cost herself her job, and how the lesson learned would reshape the way they handled customer service moving forward. Jordan, ever the competitor, took the opportunity to make sweeping changes. He met with the management team, setting new expectations for staff training, emphasizing respect, and ensuring that every guest, regardless of their appearance, was treated with dignity. Employees were required to undergo new hospitality courses, and a secret shopper program was implemented to ensure quality service at all times. Jessica, for her part, became one of the biggest advocates for the changes. She worked tirelessly to improve not only her own approach, but also to help train new employees on the importance of first impressions and treating every guest with the same level of care. Months later, Jordan returned to the Regal Crest, this time with an official entourage. As he approached the reception desk, a familiar face greeted him, Jessica, now the senior receptionist, standing confidently behind the counter. "Welcome back to the Regal Crest, Mr. Jordan," she said with a warm smile. "It's an honor to have you here." Jordan grinned. "Glad to see you're still here." "And glad to be here," she replied. "Let me personally escort you to your suite." As they walked through the now flawlessly managed hotel, Jordan knew one thing for certain. Sometimes the best lessons came from unexpected moments, and sometimes a single mistake had the power to transform an entire institution for the better. Michael Jordan settled into the plush seating of his penthouse suite, a steaming cup of coffee in hand as he gazed out over the Chicago skyline. The morning sun painted the city in hues of gold and crimson, a reminder of how far he had come, from a kid with big dreams in Wilmington, North Carolina, to an international icon, and now a respected businessman. He had built a legacy not just through basketball, but through his ventures in business and philanthropy. His brand was synonymous with excellence, and he demanded that same standard in everything he touched. That's why the incident with Jessica the night before still lingered in his mind. Not because he took personal offense, but because it exposed a deeper problem in the hospitality industry and more broadly in society. The true measure of success wasn't just in championships or financial gain, it was in the impact you had on others. He sipped his coffee and made a decision. He wasn't just going to implement training programs for the staff at Regal Crest, he was going to use his influence to push for industry-wide change. Picking up his phone, he called Langston, the regional director of the hotel chain. "Langston," he said as soon as the man picked up, "I want a meeting with the executives. Today." There was a beat of silence before Langston responded, his voice laced with nervous energy. "Of course, Mr. Jordan. May I ask what this is regarding?" "Customer service," Jordan said, "and respect." By noon, the conference room on the top floor of the Regal Crest was filled with a dozen executives, all sitting stiffly in their chairs, nervously glancing at one another. Jordan walked in, dressed in a casual yet commanding manner, his Air Jordans making soft thuds against the floor. "Gentlemen," he began, his deep voice carrying authority without needing to be raised, "we have a problem." The room remained silent. Jordan continued, pacing slowly. "I didn't buy this hotel just to own another asset. I bought it because I believe in building something great. But that only happens when people feel valued. Every guest who walks through these doors, whether they're in a three-piece suit or a hoodie, should be treated the same way." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. Jordan set his coffee cup down with deliberate precision. "What happened at the front desk last night wasn't just a mistake. It was a symptom of a larger issue." He glanced at Langston. "And I won't let my hotel be known for treating people differently based on assumptions." Langston cleared his throat. "Mr. Jordan, I assure you, we hold our staff to the highest standard." Jordan cut him off with a single look. "If that were true, I wouldn't be having this meeting." A heavy silence followed. Jordan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "Here's what we're going to do. We're implementing a new mandatory training program. Not just a seminar, but a real hands-on experience. Every employee will undergo extensive diversity and hospitality training. And we're going to introduce an incentive system for employees who go above and beyond to make guests feel welcome." One of the executives hesitantly raised his hand. "Sir, do you believe an incentive program is necessary? We expect our employees to do their jobs correctly as it is." Jordan gave him a measured look. "People will do what's required, but if you want them to excel, you have to show them why it matters, and you have to reward excellence." The executive nodded, seemingly considering Jordan's words. "Furthermore," Jordan continued, "I want a guest experience monitoring team, secret shoppers, anonymous reviews. I want to know exactly how we're doing, from the most expensive suites to the smallest rooms." Langston nodded quickly. "I can have a report drafted within the week." Jordan smiled slightly. "Good, because if we're going to be the best, we're going to earn it." In the weeks that followed, the Regal Crest underwent a transformation. Employees attended immersive training sessions that didn't just focus on customer service, but also on unconscious bias. They were placed in scenarios that challenged their perceptions and encouraged them to question assumptions. Jessica, having learned firsthand how damaging assumptions could be, became one of the program's biggest advocates. She volunteered to speak during training sessions, sharing her own experience and how it had changed her approach to hospitality. Every person who walks in, she told a room full of new hires one morning, is carrying a story you don't know. Your job isn't to judge them, it's to welcome them. The culture of the hotel shifted. Guests began noticing the difference in the service. Reviews reflected the change, and soon the Regal Crest wasn't just known for its luxurious suites, it became known for its exceptional hospitality. Jordan kept a close eye on the progress, reviewing reports and speaking with staff members personally. One afternoon, while walking through the lobby, he noticed an elderly man struggling with his luggage. Before a bellhop could get there, Jessica stepped forward. "Allow me to help you, sir," she said with a warm smile, lifting the suitcase with ease. Jordan observed quietly from a distance, nodding to himself. This was what he wanted. Not just a hotel, but a legacy of excellence. Word of the changes at the Regal Crest began spreading throughout the hospitality industry. Other hotels took notice, intrigued by the success of Jordan's approach. Several executives from competing chains reached out, asking about the new training model and guest experience programs. Soon an invitation arrived. The Global Hospitality Summit, a gathering of the biggest names in the industry, wanted Michael Jordan to deliver the keynote speech. Jordan initially hesitated. He wasn't one for long speeches, but then he realized this was a chance to create an even bigger impact. Standing on the stage in front of hundreds of industry leaders, he began his speech the same way he had started his conversation with the Regal Crest executives. "We have a problem," he said simply. The audience sat up straighter, intrigued. Jordan went on to describe what had happened at his hotel, how a single assumption had revealed a deeper issue, how respect and dignity should never be optional in hospitality, and how real change required accountability. By the time he finished, the room was filled with applause. The speech made headlines. Other hotel chains began adopting similar training models. And just like that, what had started as one moment of poor judgment at a reception desk turned into a movement that reshaped an industry. Months later, Michael Jordan returned to the Regal Crest. This time, it wasn't undercover. It wasn't a test. It was simply to enjoy the fruits of the work they had done. Jessica was still at the front desk, now a lead trainer as well as the senior receptionist. She greeted him with a genuine smile. "Mr. Jordan," she said warmly. "Welcome home." Jordan chuckled. "Good to be back." She handed him his room key, but this time there was no hesitation, no skepticism, just respect. As he made his way to the elevator, he glanced around the bustling lobby. Guests were being welcomed with kindness. Employees were engaging with people, not just as customers, but as individuals. He smiled to himself. This was success, not the trophies, not the wealth, but the knowledge that he had left something better than he found it. And as long as that remained true, Michael Jordan would always be a champion. Michael Jordan had always understood that true greatness wasn't achieved overnight. It required dedication, persistence, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The transformation of the Regal Crest Hotel wasn't just about one receptionist's mistake. It was about rewriting the culture of an entire industry. Months after the changes had been implemented, Jordan found himself reflecting on how much had shifted since that fateful night at the front desk. Walking through the hotel lobby now, there was a different energy in the air. Employees carried themselves with confidence, engaging warmly with guests instead of just performing routine tasks. The once subtle air of judgment that had lingered in the interactions between staff and patrons was gone, replaced by a genuine effort to make every guest feel valued. The effects of the training and incentives had exceeded his expectations. Employee retention had increased, guest satisfaction ratings had soared. And for the first time since Jordan had acquired the hotel, he felt confident that the business was operating at the standard he had always envisioned. But most importantly, the lessons learned here were being passed on, not just within the walls of the Regal Crest, but across the entire hospitality sector. One evening, as Jordan was making his way through the lobby toward the hotel's restaurant, a familiar figure stepped up to the front desk. A middle-aged man in a worn leather jacket, a weathered duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The man approached the counter with an air of hesitation, as if he wasn't entirely sure he belonged. Jessica, now fully in command of her role as senior receptionist, welcomed him with a warm, professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Regal Crest. How can I assist you?" The man cleared his throat. I don't have a reservation," he admitted, his fingers tightening around the strap of his bag. "But I need a room for the night." Jessica tapped at her keyboard. "Of course, sir. We do have availability. Would you prefer a standard room or a suite?" The man hesitated before answering, clearly unsure of whether he could afford the higher-end option. "Just a standard room will do," he said. Jessica nodded, clicking through the system. "That will be $280 for the night, sir. May I have a credit card to process the booking?" The man pulled out his wallet, his hands slightly unsteady as he retrieved an older-looking card and handed it over. Jessica took it with the same professionalism and care she would have given a billionaire. Jordan, who had been standing nearby, observing the interaction, recognized the man almost immediately. He stepped closer, watching as Jessica processed the transaction without a trace of judgment or hesitation. The man, still seemingly nervous, glanced up and locked eyes with Jordan. His eyes widened in shock. "Mike!" he breathed. Jordan smiled, finally stepping forward. "Johnny?" The man's face broke into a grin. "Man, I can't believe this. It's been years." Johnny Porter had been one of Jordan's childhood friends back in Wilmington, North Carolina. They had spent summers playing basketball on the local courts, racing bikes through the neighborhood, and getting into all sorts of harmless trouble. But as time went on, life had taken them down drastically different paths. Jordan had gone on to become the greatest basketball player of all time, while Johnny had struggled, bouncing between jobs, cities, and bad luck. "It's been a long time," Jordan said, shaking Johnny's hand. "What brings you to Chicago?" Johnny sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Got a job interview tomorrow morning, trying to get back on my feet." Jordan studied his old friend, noting the tiredness in his eyes. Johnny wasn't asking for anything, just a fair chance. Jessica finished processing the transaction and slid Johnny's room key across the counter. "You're all set, Mr. Porter," she said kindly. "Room 817. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to let us know." Johnny took the key, nodding his thanks. Jordan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, let's grab some dinner. Catch up properly." Later that evening, Jordan and Johnny sat in one of the hotel's private dining rooms, reminiscing over plates of perfectly cooked steak and glasses of fine wine. "Man," Johnny said, shaking his head in disbelief, "I still can't wrap my head around it. You own this whole place?" Jordan chuckled. "Yeah, just one of the things I've been working on since retiring." Johnny let out a low whistle. "You always had that drive, though. Even when we were kids. We'd be out on the courts, messing around, and you'd be over there practicing fadeaways like you were already in the NBA. Jordan leaned back, smiling. "That's the thing, Johnny. No one sees the work. They just see the results." Johnny nodded slowly, setting his fork down. "Yeah, I wish I had figured that out sooner. Maybe I wouldn't have made so many mistakes." Jordan frowned. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what you do after them." Johnny exhaled, shaking his head. "I just need this job, man. It's been rough. I want to do better. I need to do better." Jordan studied his old friend for a moment. "What's the job?" "Hotel security," Johnny said, taking a sip of his water. "A buddy of mine told me about an opening at a place across town. It's not much, but it's steady work." Jordan nodded thoughtfully. Then, after a pause, he said, "Forget that job. Come work for me." Johnny blinked. "What?" Jordan smiled. "You need a job, and I need people I can trust. I'll put you in touch with my head of security. If you're serious about turning things around, I'll give you the chance to do it right here." Johnny stared at him, disbelief etched into his features. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Jordan said. "But I'm not just handing you a paycheck. You earn it. You work hard, you show up, and you do the job right." Johnny let out a shaky laugh. "Mike, Man, I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," Jordan said simply. Johnny's eyes glistened for a moment before he nodded. "Yes, absolutely yes." A week later, Johnny Porter officially started his training as part of the Regal Crest security team. He took the job seriously, showing up early, working hard, and proving that he was committed to changing his life. Jordan checked in on him from time to time, offering quiet encouragement but never making a big deal out of it. Jessica, too, noticed the change in Johnny. She remembered the nervous man who had approached the front desk just days ago, unsure of whether he belonged. Now, he carried himself differently. He had purpose. One evening, as Jordan walked through the lobby, he spotted Johnny at his post, standing tall, his eyes scanning the room with quiet attentiveness. Johnny caught his eye and gave him a small nod. Jordan nodded back. Another success. Not just a successful business, not just a successful rebranding, but a successful impact on a life. As he walked toward the elevators, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about a hotel anymore. This was about legacy. And in that moment, Michael Jordan knew he was still winning. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us. What are your thoughts on a receptionist humiliating Michael Jordan, unaware he owns the hotel? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.